Bob Gibson was one of the most dominant pitchers in MLB history, a true Hall of Fame legend whose fierce presence on the mound struck fear into the hearts of batters. Gibson terrorized opponents with his blazing fastball and intimidating demeanor, helping transform the St. Louis Cardinals into a powerhouse team of his era. Recognized by baseball historians as perhaps the most intimidating pitcher ever, Gibson was selected for 9 All-Star games, won 2 Cy Young Awards, and still holds the modern-era record for lowest ERA in a season at 1.12. For many, Gibson's legacy extends far beyond his incredible statistics. He broke barriers as one of baseball's pioneering African-American stars in the 1960s, excelling during the Civil Rights era despite facing persistent discrimination. His legendary 1968 season was so dominant that MLB actually lowered the pitcher's mound the following year in what became known as the Gibson Rule. However, some critics argue that Gibson's aggressive pitching style, frequently throwing inside and hitting batters, crossed ethical lines. Even though it was considered part of the game during his era, intimidation was an accepted part of baseball strategy at the time, just as it remains today, even when it pushed the boundaries of sportsmanship. Pitchers like Don Drysdale and Early Wynn were known for deliberately throwing at batters, while hitters crowded the plate and slid with spikes high. Gibson was just one of many players who embraced baseball's cruel side, though he did it with unmatched intensity and skill. His approach to pitching inside was especially controversial, given that he played in an era before batters wore helmets with ear flaps. Therefore, the question arises, should Gibson's intimidation tactics diminish his legacy, or was he simply a product of his time playing the game the way it was played? Bob Gibson was born on November 9, 1935, in Omaha, Nebraska, the youngest of 7 children. His early life was marked by hardship. His father died of tuberculosis 3 months before Bob was born, leaving his mother Victoria to raise the family alone during the Great Depression. Growing up in a segregated neighborhood, young Gibson battled both poverty and chronic illness, suffering from asthma, rickets, and a heart murmur that kept him bedridden for long stretches of his childhood. His older brother Josh, who was 15 years his senior, became a father figure and mentor. Josh had played baseball in the Negro Leagues and recognized athletic talent in his youngest brother. He fashioned a makeshift baseball diamond in a nearby vacant lot where he taught Bob the fundamentals of the game. By the time Gibson reached Omaha Technical High School in 1949, he had overcome his childhood ailments and blossomed into a multi-sport athlete. Though baseball wasn't actually his primary sport at first, Gibson excelled in basketball and track, setting a school record in the high jump. On the baseball field, he started as an outfielder before moving to pitcher, where his natural athleticism and competitive fire found their perfect outlet. The racial barriers of the 1950s initially steered Gibson toward basketball rather than baseball. After graduating high school in 1953, he accepted a basketball scholarship to Creighton University, becoming the first African-American athlete to play basketball and baseball for the school. Gibson would later recall that basketball seemed to offer better opportunities for black athletes at the time. At Creighton, Gibson continued playing both sports while working various jobs to help support his family. He played for the Harlem Globetrotters during the baseball offseason in 1957, earning more money than he would initially make in the minor leagues. However, baseball ultimately won out when the St. Louis Cardinals organization noticed his pitching prowess and signed him to a contract in 1957. Gibson's early years in professional baseball reflected the persistent racism of the era. While playing in the minor leagues, he often couldn't stay in the same hotels as his white teammates or eat in the same restaurants. During spring training in Florida, Gibson had to live with a black family because hotels wouldn't accommodate him. These experiences hardened his already intense competitive nature and reinforced his determination to succeed. By 1959, Gibson had worked his way through the Cardinals farm system, making his major league debut on April 15th. His first few seasons were marked by inconsistency as he struggled with control and confidence. The turning point came in 1961 when Cardinals catcher Tim McCarver began calling his games. McCarver recognized Gibson's exceptional talent and fierce competitiveness, helping him channel these qualities into a more focused approach on the mound. Gibson's emergence as a dominant pitcher coincided with a transformation in his pitching style. He developed a reputation for throwing inside to batters, not merely to intimidate, but as part of a comprehensive approach to controlling the strike zone. His arsenal included a blazing fastball that could reach 95 miles per hour, a devastating slider that seemed to disappear as it reached the plate, and a curveball that kept hitters off balance. But it wasn't just his pitches that made him formidable, it was his demeanor. Gibson worked quickly, never smiled on the mound, and maintained an intense focus that made even veteran hitters uncomfortable. By 1962, Gibson had established himself as the Cardinals' ace, beginning a stretch of dominance that would define his career. His rise paralleled the Cardinals' emergence as a National League powerhouse, as the team built around their intimidating pitcher with players like Lou Brock, Curt Flood, and Orlando Cepeda. The stage was set for Gibson to become not just a great pitcher, but a legend who would change the way the game was played. Gibson's greatest season came in 1968, a year that would become known as the Year of the Pitcher. His performance that season was so extraordinary that it literally changed baseball's rules. Gibson posted an incredible 1.12 ERA over 304 innings, threw 13 shutouts, and struck out 268 batters. During one stretch, he pitched 47 consecutive scoreless innings. His dominance was so complete that MLB responded by lowering the pitcher's mound from 15 to 10 inches the following season, a change that became known as the Gibson Rule. The 1968 season also saw Gibson make one of baseball's most memorable performances in Game 1 of the World Series against the Detroit Tigers. He set a World Series record by striking out 17 batters, a mark that stood for 50 years. Though the Cardinals ultimately lost that series, Gibson's performance cemented his reputation as one of baseball's greatest big-game pitchers. Gibson's intimidating presence reached its peak during this period. He was known for his unwritten rule. The entire plate belonged to him. If batters dared to dig in or lean over the plate, Gibson would throw inside without hesitation. When asked about his philosophy of pitching inside, Gibson famously stated, "The only way to protect the outer part of the plate is to pitch inside." This approach led to numerous confrontations, but Gibson never backed down. He hit 102 batters during his career, not an extremely high number for his era, but the reputation for his willingness to throw inside made every at-bat against him. In 1975, after 17 seasons with the Cardinals, Gibson retired with 251 wins, 3,117 strikeouts, and a career ERA of 2.91. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1981 on the first ballot, receiving 84% of the votes. His number 45 was retired by the Cardinals, and a statue of him stands outside Busch Stadium in St. Louis. After retirement, Gibson remained connected to baseball, serving as a pitching coach for the New York Mets and Atlanta Braves. He also became an outspoken voice on issues of race in baseball, sharing his experiences and perspectives on the game's integration. In 1994, he opened Bob Gibson's Restaurant and Bar in Omaha, which became a popular local establishment featuring baseball memorabilia from his career. In 1996, Gibson faced a different kind of battle when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. True to his competitive nature, he approached this challenge with the same determination he showed on the mound. He underwent successful surgery and became an advocate for cancer research and awareness. This experience led him to establish the Bob Gibson Foundation, which supports youth baseball programs and cancer research. On October 2, 2020, Gibson passed away in his hometown of Omaha, leaving behind a legacy that transcended his statistics. Current Cardinals pitcher Adam Wainwright, who wears number 50 because 45 was retired for Gibson, said upon his passing, "Nobody intimidated batters better, and nobody commanded more respect on the mound." Given Gibson's entire legacy and contribution to baseball, there's no doubt he deserved his place in the Hall of Fame.